Grace is not fair, it is generous. This week's passage is Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. And in this passage, Jesus tells a parable about a rich landowner. And this rich landowner went out looking for laborers. There was harvest and he needed more workers. And so he goes out and he looks for workers. He finds some at 6 a.m. He says, I'll pay you 1 denarius to go work for me. Now, this would have been a fair wage. And they went and they worked for him. The landowner decides at 9 a.m., well, let me go see if there's more workers out there. If there are, I'll hire them. And so he does. Then at noon, at 3 p.m., and even at 5 p.m., when there's 1 hour left, he goes and looks for more workers. As the workday comes to an end at 6 p.m., he says to his foreman, hey, gather all of the people. Gather them around, and I'm going to pay them, starting with those who came at 5 p.m. And those who came at 5 p.m., he gave 1 denarius. And the ones who came at 3 p.m., he gave 1 denarius. And it says that those who were hired first started to get excited, like, oh, like if these people hired just for an hour or 2 hours and get paid 1 denarius, think of how much we're going to get. But then he gets to those first workers, right? The last one's paid. And he pays them 1 denarius. And they get a little frustrated, mad, and upset. And the landowner says to them, why are you getting upset? Like, did we not agree on the 1 denarius? Was that not fair? Am I not allowed to be generous? Again, in this passage, Jesus is telling us that grace is not fair, it is generous. See, if we interpret this passage, the landowner is God, and he decides to give who he decides to give to. He is gracious to all. Whether you are saved right away or for a short time, God's grace is the same to all. And a big takeaway for me in this is that often I think I am the 6 a.m. worker, that I deserve God's grace a little bit more than anyone else. And yet the reality is that I am a 5 p.m. worker, that I am not deserving of the grace at all. So I want to encourage you in that, to say you are no more deserved of God's grace than anyone else, and you are no more less deserving of God's grace than anyone else. Because remember that grace is not fair, it is generous.